talk about something maybe a little different, but which we hope will integrate with the other presentations you've both heard today as well as what to come. I'm Michael Losavio with the University of Louisville. I'm in the Criminal Justice Department, which may be more appropriate than you might think at first about dealing with issues of information security. Our panel today includes Dr. Adrian Lau, who is in the Computer Engineering and Computer Science Department for the Speed School of Engineering, who focuses on both mesh and drone networks as well as InfoSec concerns. We have Joe Ranieri, who returned from after he finished his Master's of Psychology degree, realized that's not where he wanted to be, went back and got a computer science degree, and is now a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation for the U.S. Department of Justice, who focuses on cybercrime. And lastly, we have Susanna Cornett, who is one of our criminal justice graduates. His particular focus now is on trying to help get us grant monies to explore these issues in ways we are going to talk about today, which may not have been explored. Part of this, to put you all to work, is that we have surveys. But I only have about half enough for everybody, so if you don't mind, if you could you turn and introduce yourselves to your colleague, and you can both fill out one. You're putting a slash between the respective numbers. So please, talk. Say hello to your neighbors. How many of y'all have met your colleagues? So try and share. One to every two people. So, by the way, what is this painting of? When you're presenter, you get away with anything. Yes. Well, that's okay. All right, this is Vermeer's. It's a portrait of a woman reading a letter. Vermeer is a tremendous painter, so I try to slip him in wherever I can. But the point is, when he was painting, this was a radical technology, and this was a radical implementation of the technology. A woman reading and writing letters to other people. With every new information technology, you've got security issues which crop up. We've had a lot of time to deal with writing and sending messages in code and through security services. We've only had these technology systems for a fairly short amount of time, and we submit that part of the problem with
You're okay. Left here, all the way left, just right.
There we go. We're basically repeating something that came out of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence back in 2008, that all of our approaches to information security were flawed because they're always post-hoc, they're after the fact, trying to respond to a threat we've already identified. There's already been some discussion, that antivirus is just not as good as it might be. It does some good, but it doesn't protect, not even against zero-day threats, from stuff that's been out for 6 months. Partly because of our practices, the way we use it. So what do you do? What has been interesting is that a lot of our computer engineering students no longer use antivirus. They have other practices which they think keep them safer and generally are successful. But how do you deal with the other 349.8 million people in the United States that don't have that level of knowledge for these systems? So what we believe is that we need to look at the current state of cybersecurity, its failings, and how we can remediate some of these things in maybe a different way. Cyber war is certainly over the top, but they have implemented within the past 3 years a cyber
ad hoc networks and embedded devices. So one of the things, however, that I've had the privilege of doing is working with small businesses and medium-sized businesses in Louisville, as I'm sure many of you guys do, and seeing the security practices that are implemented. Now, most of you who are all IT professionals have a strong understanding of what the environment out there looks like, what threats are popular, and what things tend to go on networks. My experience so far is that a large majority of companies don't. And it's very interesting to see what people think they know about how secure their networks are. And I'm talking about companies that still today, in 2014, use standard FTP to move sensitive documents back and forth between them and their customers. Or leave a large swath of their computers out and open on the internet with port 3389 turned on, no network level authentication, and password as their password. So there is sort of a deficit of understanding that I'm sure you have come to see between what exists in the real world and what we as security-minded persons choose to elect for our practices. So it's been an interesting experience. I actually work on more embedded systems, things you can't browse Facebook on, and that is, how many of you guys are familiar with the Internet of Things? Surely everybody, right? And so I think that is the next big front in securing, and we know even less about security on Internet of Things than we do on our standard PCs and network environments, because ad hoc networking provides so much more open space to play around and mess with things. And of course, companies spend a lot less time securing things like Wi-Fi connected thermometers and thermostats than they do your relatively locked down browser, such as Google Chrome and whatnot. But I think one of the key points that we and especially when we're talking about this proposed research work, research and training work, is how do we assess savviness, if you will? How do you assess a business or a person or an individual's ability to understand where they fit in terms of cybersecurity? All of you guys probably read news updates, you probably stay current with articles and so on and so forth, but most people don't know the differences between a firewall or not. I was speaking to some students yesterday who thought that antivirus software, preferably more than one, installed at the same time, that they would be all good and secure, and that the firewall would do the rest. And as we know, the social networking and social engineering is the primary vector for infection for most home computers, and therefore it's very easy to engineer a spearfishing attack and bring down an entire company. Maybe you guys have dealt with that in your own experiences. I definitely have, and the degree of sophistication is definitely increasing. So understanding what people understand about their environment and where businesses stand, perhaps to contribute to some sort of a score, I think is a particularly important and relevant thing today. The walking across the street example is something that's been ingrained by our culture. A couple things to think about, though. We know that if we get hit by a car, the outcome is not particularly good. In the cybersecurity world, the car is not always visible, and so it is a little bit harder to know what you're about to get hit with. Although the effects can be metaphorically just as devastating to a particular infrastructure or group. So, something to think about: how do you assess the readiness? How do you do it in your own practice? I don't even know exactly how to quantify how I do it. Follow best practices and what best practices are, and What does it mean for a group and an organization to be more or less informed and ready to face future possible threats?
All right. Thank you, Adrian. How many of y'all work in regulated financial industries? How many of y'all work in organizations with personal health information? Okay. In some ways, I think you're going to be the leaders in this process because by statute, y'all have had to address some of these issues well before everybody else, including the University of Louisville, which, as best I can tell, we don't do anything. It's all on your back. So, all right, good. Well, all right, somewhere along here, there it is. I knew he was first. Special Agent Joe Ranier about the relationship between law enforcement and cybersecurity.
Well, everyone's seen the FBI on TV, and we do a lot of things. The cybersecurity, cyber investigations, computer intrusions, you don't see a lot of that on TV. Actually, you see a lot of the FBI on TV committing some of those crimes, particularly the ones at NCIS. They seem to do a lot of hacking, which we don't do. There's a chance in a galaxy far, far away, there's a rebels and the alliance going on. That's more realistic than NCIS. I just had to get that out because that's a question we get a lot. We have an InfoGuard booth here. That's one of our main outreach methods that we do. Through InfoGuard, they'll send out a lot of email updates that we get from headquarters that'll have just flash alerts of things that are happening. A lot of people, if you keep really current, you subscribe to a lot of other mailing lists, you may see some of this stuff a second time, or maybe something you're seeing for the first time, or get it a day ahead of time. And sometimes that day ahead of time is really good because you can find out about it on Saturday. Otherwise, it would be nice to take it on Friday before you got home and we're enjoying the weekend. We also do a lot of outreach in the form of presentations, whether it's talking at something like this, or going to certain organizations. And this is Cybersecurity Month. We have a lot of people that ask us for come out and do presentations. And we try to accommodate as many people as we can. The larger the groups, we try to spread our resources accordingly. We'll come out, talk to you, let you know about some of the threats that are out there, what we're seeing, and what are some basic best practices that you can do as an employee to protect your organization, and also as an individual, what you can do at home to protect yourself and your family. And then also another thing is the standard investigation. We do not show up in big black SUVs wearing rain jackets and take your servers and you never hear from us again. The majority of times, if any of you were to interface with me in a professional capacity, in your professional capacity, more than likely, you would be the victim in that instance. Your organization would have suffered some type of computer intrusion or a breach. One of the ones that's very common with the small to medium-sized business, I saw a lot of people go with the healthcare one, is a data breach of some sort of kind. PHI is kind of the money item in the criminal underground because you're getting named, date, birth, social security number, address, you're getting all that healthcare information, so you can commit almost any type of fraud you want with that information. So it's worth a lot more than just a credit card number or just a name, date of birth, and things like that. So if we did come visit you, we would, we'd be treating you like a victim. We understand that in the middle of this crisis that you're suffering, you're also trying to get your business back up and running or assess the damage done to your organization. And part of the reason we like to do the outreach is to let you know some of the things that we would be asking for. Our first question is normally what happened? What do you know? You're the person on scene. You know your network better than anyone else. And one of the first things we say is, what is your network? What does it look like? Where have you identified this stuff? Do you have a network map? Can you start drawing some circles on it to find out where it is? And then once it's kind of isolated to that area, what logging do you have in that area? A lot of people are really big on having a firewall and protecting any bad stuff from coming in. That's half the battle. A lot of times, when you're talking about this criminal element, or even true in our national security aspect, the bad guy's goal is to not just get into your network, it's also to get into your network and then get out. Are they trying to get your patient health information out, credit card information out, or whatever secret, or proprietary documents you're working on? If you're working on a widget that's much better than your competitor's widget, if they get those plans out, that can be devastating to your company. So the exfiltration of data is also something that's very important and that we like to see. The more advanced hackers, they will come in from one location, whether it be from a spearfishing email or maybe a compromised website, a drive-by download, watering hole attack, and then they'll exfiltrate to another point. And the more of these points that we can identify, we can also take that information and in some of the preliminary steps of our investigation, we can also provide information back. They say, hey, you've seen this type of activity before. You may also want to check something else. Oftentimes we may be able to provide hints, tips on this group, the persistent mechanisms may be X, Y, or Z. Oftentimes there'll be a domain controller, or they like to gravitate maybe towards Linux systems and hang out there in case you stomp them out and they can't get in. There's a lot of things that we can do and we want to do, but we will work with you through the process. We don't go to the press. I think a great example of what it's like to work with the FBI, I think it was maybe 2005 or so, Coca-Cola was contacted by the FBI about a state-sponsored intrusion. There was an article in the Forbes magazine about this intrusion, I think in 2011 or 12. It was because of someone had left the company and decided to talk about it. It wasn't us. Things don't end up in the press just because you contacted us. So if something does happen, feel free to reach out to us, ask us questions. Is this really a thing that you guys would work on? Is one of the most common questions we get. And we try to bring in as much information as we can, because if you just lost $20,000, would we open a full investigation and work that? Maybe not, but we still want that information, or we'll have that information sent to a partner agency we work with, which is Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is at ic3.gov. And basically, they take a lot of this stuff, they aggregate the information together, $10,000, $5,000 here, and if we aggregate this all together, we may be able to find some commonalities, whether it's IP addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, things like that they can put together and maybe find out, okay, this guy is doing all this activity. Because that's why cyber criminals like their job as a cyber criminal, is that from the comfort of their home or their mother's basement, they can go ahead and attack multiple organizations all at the same time. And that's a big part of our job, is not just addressing the one incident, but trying to tie it in to the bigger picture of what this guy may be working.
Thank you, Joe. So, are you all now comfortable with the man? But think for a moment. Somebody busts into your business and steals all your computer gear. You're calling the police, yes? Mm-hmm. Why has there traditionally been a reticence, a hesitation to call law enforcement when there has been a network breach of information, but not of physical assets? Well, what would you speculate?
More complex.
More complex. Yes, I was thinking, when I was growing up, the police television show was the Andy Griffith Show. And, I would be cool with calling the sheriff. I would not want Barney Fife anywhere near any of my electronic systems. So that does become an issue. But as you see here, the FBI has a lot of expertise. So now, if you have an agency which has expertise in dealing with your systems, with maintaining them, letting you get them back online, what would your hesitation be? What would you say, sir? No? Yes, ma'am.
Reputation.
Reputational damage is huge. It's a huge concern. Is that right, Joe?
That's definitely something to be concerned about. You got to worry about name recognition, but normally we're not the ones going to the press. We work with you, and you're a victim in that instance. We work with you accordingly.
Yeah, I think the FBI is going to be much more discreet than Barney Fife. Yes, sir.
I think in the case of intellectual property, some companies may feel it's, they already have it, I can't get it back per se, what they've seen, why bother call the authorities and, because they can't unsee it, can't get it back.
All right, that's a good point. And I'm going to throw this out. I would say we have a split here in terms of breach damages. Joe was talking to our students at U of L yesterday and pointing out that a lot of this is about financial advantage. They're going in to get something. It's not about vandalism anymore. So it seems like the two big domains are going to be intellectual property, which can be exceptionally valuable in terms of patents, copyright information, code, things of that nature. And on the other hand, personal identifiable information, which can itself then be used to exploit and steal from others. Those two big domains. If all you've had stolen is IP, then the breach notification laws might not kick in. But as some of y'all saw last month, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Pittsburgh issued indictments for 5 PLA officers. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, basically, the five guys from the People's Liberation Army, basically sitting somewhere in a building in China, a lot like the Canadian APT-1 report, guys doing that type of activity, and we work with organizations, I think Alcoa or a couple large organizations where they were stealing their basically information to get a competitive advantage in doing business with U.S. companies or something like that. So these companies probably lost a significant amount of money due to this breach, and then they were able to work with us and putting together a case. Are they ever going to see the inside of a courtroom? I don't know about that. It's you mentioned it's already out the door. What are you going to do? The one thing to think about it is it's already out the door. There may not be much you can do, but letting us know about it, and it may not be able to go to an investigation, but it's kind of being maybe that information will help it prevent stopping it from happening from someone else. Maybe these guys started out before they went to large multinational companies. They started out with smaller, medium-sized companies, and maybe those people didn't detect it. Maybe those people just didn't report it because it was already out. I just make a little motor better than my competitor. No big deal. But the more information we get on these guys, particularly earlier on in the career, before they develop better OPSEC, it's good to get the information at that point. You guys may not care. We may not be able to do anything, but we get that information in there, and we can start building, some background on some of what these guys do, and maybe it'll prevent the guy sitting next to you from his company losing their proprietary information. I know it seems a lot of times when there's when an employee works at a company and he steals information, companies, even they may have left, and you can't for certain say that I don't know if that information, someone may have already seen it, they can't unsee it, they're still going to seek prosecution with that. You hear about that frequently with the theft of trade secret between organizations. It's kind of the same thing with the intrusions related to that information. Information's out there, but let's also stop it, and then also there's a court ruling proving that happened, so if you ever did go after your competitor, that could be beneficial. I'm not the attorney here, so.
My meter's running it. Yes, the tradition is exactly like you say. Before this event, this was really kind of a watershed, because I said, what good is it? Why they've got it now. It's China. What can you do? But the companies, Alcoa, U.S. Steel, Westinghouse, and a couple of others said, enough is enough. We've got to say, we are now going to put this out there as an ongoing breach of our systems. And we want something done. The indictments represent the first such attacks against officers of a foreign government for this kind of behavior. While these guys will never be prosecuted unless they make the mistake of taking a transfer through Atlanta, then you're still building the case for this kind of theft. It both can be the foundation for multilateral treaties with the European Union on what to do about this kind of misconduct, but also for WTO action, because these are PLO Army officers. If state-sponsored theft is being supported by the Chinese government, that's an unfair trade practice. We can hit them on some other form. The only way we can do so is if people come out and say, this is going on, we got to stop it. And of course, China says, it wasn't us. But it's an effort to begin this notion of using general deterrence theories to make them potentially pay for their wrongdoing. For everybody else, if you've got personal identifiable information, Kentucky now says you've got to report. So it's good to be in compliance. Here's a question. How many of y'all have had your lawyers talk to you about this new statute? Anybody? What did they say? Well, don't tell me that. That's your lawyer. Sorry, my bad.
They said a lot.
But notice the statute has no statutory penalties to it.
No enforcement.
Nope. So no enforcement. I mean, this is good for lawyers because we can litigate this all day. But it's not as strong as it might be. It's certainly not as strong as California. But it's going to be a start looking at how this all comes together. So with that, Ms. Cornett, do you see any way we can maybe bring this together? Help us all, save us. Tell us about the research initiative.
For 15 years, and my background is in criminal justice and activities. I'm not speaking loud enough. My brother would say that I always speak too loud. And my proof home is not now. No.
Hold it up close.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll try not to yell. The grant that we're looking to apply for from NSF is seeking to improve cybersecurity on several fronts. And the part that we're looking at is the social and behavioral. And one of the things that Professor Losavio mentioned was that a lot of the problems within the companies is not based in the hardware or the software. It's based in the actions of the users that you're working with on a daily basis. Those of us, and I say us, sadly, who write down passwords, who keep their information in unsecure places, who may leave it lying around our home and someone picks it up. And also a lot of times the people who are coming in and compromising your information are employees. Either they're disgruntled employees who have left and took information with them, or even sometimes placed backdoors into your systems. Other kinds of people activities. And so that's what we're looking at when we're talking about the surveys that we've handed out and the kind of grant approach that we're looking at. We want to find out what is happening socially and behaviorally in those organizations, in those different businesses, and what are some approaches that we can use based on criminal justice theory that can help us improve security by applying certain kinds of theoretical responses to social and behavioral, would you say, missteps. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. But it's not a small problem. We're looking to address it at the intersection of business and personal internet use, which is small businesses. And if you think about that, a lot of really small businesses, sometimes they are family businesses. A lot of times they operate like a family system as opposed to a more regimented, larger business plan. And those leave a lot more doors open for different kinds of social and behavioral issues. But in 2011, a full third of business cyber attacks focused on small businesses with fewer than 250 employees. How many of you work for organizations with 250 or fewer employees? Not a lot of them, just a few.
Well, I have a question now. How many of you have contractors that you work with that have fewer than 250 employees? Who does your cleaning? Who does the cleaning in your office building? Who does your HVAC maintenance? So the Target breach began with their air conditioning contractor, who then, because they were were networked into the systems, were then able to put the point of sale malware across Target's entire store network.
And if you want to talk about breaches that can happen even when you have highly trained and high reputation folks, just think about, wasn't it a security contractor with a handgun and several a history of assault charges who wound up on an elevator with associated with the Secret Service and President Obama just this week. So, even the best trained people can make mistakes. And so, and there again, social and behavioral issues that we're looking at. The small businesses in the U.S. represent more than 5.5 million businesses, 39 million employees, and payroll in excess of 1.4 trillion a year. And that's just the payroll. That's the payroll. Imagine what the profit and the actual gross product that we're putting out there is. And those are the people that are being affected by this kind of thing. And those are the people that we're trying to approach. So when we're giving you all this survey as a way to find out that kind of information, it's a way to help us start that process of looking at what's happening with businesses with their cybersecurity so that we can move to the next step and start putting together the metric that we were talking about earlier that can help us go in and help these small businesses do a self-assessment and make some kind of inroads into solving their problems so you don't wind up with your HVAC guy coming in and causing issues with your main profit stream.
Thank you. Suzanne. So, what is, even within your highly developed organizations, which obviously have implemented information security programs because they hired you, what's the biggest vulnerability to your system? What's the one area you cannot patch or haven't been able to patch yet? Users. So how do you show love to your users?
Yeah, typically we say no.
Typically, I say, all right, yes, and you say no, and then do you get Christmas cards from them? No, it's a cold Christmas. But that's an issue. Asia Ranieri, what on the Westinghouse Alcoa U.S. Steel hacks? How do they get in?
Well, in addition to just those, what we see most often, it's spearfishing. Spearfishing is great because the one thing that a bad guy knows about your network is that you have users. I may not know what kind of firewall you're running, but I may be able to figure out who your users are, and I can send them an email. I can do a really good job of cracking it. I can go on to Indeed or Career Builder. I'm able to determine who is your staffing company. So I can create a one-off email account, look like I'm coming from your staffing company, send you a few PDF files to your HR lady, HR person, sorry, your HR person, and then it's going to sound just like the positions you're looking for because I got current ones off the job posting. So go ahead and click on it. It seems right. In addition to the user trust, that's the other one because users have this level of trust. And through social engineering, if you can build that level of trust to get that person to just click on it, that's all the bad guy really needs. More often than not, unfortunately, if the user clicks on something and something happens they don't expect to happen, they're going to quickly forget about the last 5 to 10 seconds and go on with their day. They're not going to, every time something doesn't happen right, they're not going to call the security guy or the network guy because and they turn on it was their fault or something. The stigma of clicking on something they're not supposed to almost suppresses some reporting. But, spearfishing is definitely the largest, most common vector that we see. And up and coming one is watering hole attacks, and that's a form of cross-site or drive-by downloads that are highly targeted. If I'm a bad guy, I may compromise a website or an ad network that may be specifically targeting a certain demographic to get at that. There was an article last year sometime about the World Council for Human Affairs was compromised with a drive-by download. Presumably the people behind it were wanting to target people that were into human rights. Do you have anything to add?
Adrian?
One more thing, your jobs are about to get a little bit harder. I mentioned Internet of Things. Just a couple things to think about. For instance, my vehicle is equipped with the ability to operate the gas, the brakes, and even move the steering wheel. And while this sounds novel, all cars will have this capability probably within the next 5 years. Android is working its way into the car, and new models coming of different manufacturers coming up within this year. iOS as well, and maybe even Windows Phone. Windows in your car with internet connectivity, that sounds promising. No.
Sorry to hear.
Well, it won't blue screen and just... Anyway, crashing takes a literal meaning. But anyway, the point is internet connectivity and interconnectivity, especially through ad hoc networking, is only increasing. Threats that we cannot even possibly imagine right now will become much more commonplace. Of course, vehicles use the all-too-common CAN bus to communicate between all components on board. Yes, that includes your radio system and the Bluetooth system that is on board. Are they easy to crack and hack? Not yet. They're a little bit difficult. Hopefully will become more difficult, but ubiquity and availability equals crime of opportunity. And so that's what those are things that we will have to focus much more on than just perimeter firewalls, network intrusion detection, and user access. And as long as we still have wetware involved, meaning the human brain, we are all living in security nightmares.
Right. I mean, since James is right up front, as he always is, I'll pick on health insurance for a moment. So your company, you've got it insured, right? You say these devices are what you can use. Diabetic patient, this is the diabetes pump, the insulin pump, whatever you use. Excellent. With 5 years ago at DEF CON, somebody showed how you can hack the Bluetooth port remotely on a particularly popular insulin pump and just change those doses. So, Bluetooth port on your car, OBD. So, are there any lawyers in the room? I probably should have checked earlier. Any lawyers? No. All right. Well, see, great. Then you are all good people who love other people. A lot of what this is describing is, both getting your job done and helping protect those you care about. What do you do? How many of y'all have? How many of y'all have had a talk with your teenagers about some of these issues? Well, you have one, good. 2, or that was kind of, that was 1.5. You seem kind of, it's really, it's kind of icky stuff, it's just not part of the culture. So it's, how do we integrate this into it? Yes.
The other thing is that a lot of times with the users that we have in our facilities, their kids or their teenagers know more about the security of the environment than they do.
That's a really good point. In addition to having a discussion with your teenagers, sometimes it's your users or management that is the most difficult conversation because they may not understand at all. I think the one quote that we probably all read in the past week is, "We sell hammers." And everyone has probably had a similar comment maybe made to them. Say, wow, maybe we sell copiers, but not cameras, or something along the line. You are not the profit center for your organization. So a lot of times, we hear that a lot. We go out and talk to a lot of organizations, and people, everyone could build a better, more secure network if they had more money. That's not the case. We see people, you was describing it earlier, where it's surprisingly large for what they have, but they may have the little Cisco, black and blue router, links, depending on when it came out, sitting there, and that's theirs. And oddly enough, sometimes they actually feel really secure with this, particularly with their secure password, the @ sign, the $, so it's not a risk. And, those are the people that are feeling secure about it. That's the risk. Your teenager may have a better password on their phone.
Well, to keep you out.
Yeah. Everyone's worried about me. My friend.
Let's keep you out of daddy. That's what they're worried about. But one of the things on Susanna's survey is to look at the nature of the discussion you have even with your employees. And one reason we're asking y'all is you all really represent a huge grouping of exceptional expertise in this very rarefied area. So I'm curious, how many of y'all, like you mentioned, like with the kids, does anyone do any sort of ongoing safe computing practice training with your employees? What's the nature of that training?
2 times a year. Well, actually, there's 2 pieces to what we do. We do
Okay.
corporate-wide training. So we go through from security to proper use, avenue for more education.
All right.
We try not to punish so much as guide our associates. We know they're there to get their business done.
Right.
So the people that feel they're doing something wrong, or if we spot something they're doing, help them find a better alternative to do it more secure.
Okay, can you all hear what he's commenting on? Because that in part responds to what Joe was saying. Somebody screws up, they don't want to say anything. What about how many of y'all have issues with the personal devices, the whole BYOD thing? Anybody have a problem with that? How do y'all deal with it? How do y'all deal with their children's devices?
We don't allow on the network, right?
Okay.
Right, no tethering allowed. That's a big issue.
You still get around it?
Not if you're standing, which we do. You do. So all you have to do is take a tethered device, plug it into a secured machine to charge it, and you've got to add it to the network.
On the topic of talking to employees and what we deal with, a lot of times if we do respond to an organization, one of the simple investigative steps is to maybe monitor traffic on the network or capture some logs. And one of the questions that we have to ask before we go any further is, what's your acceptable use policy? Is there something that they sign when they're onboarded? Is there a banner when they get on the network and things like that? And not just from a law enforcement perspective, from yours. Sometimes if you guys have an issue at the office, sometimes that's a discussion to have with your in-house counsel or whoever handles that for your office, because that can sometimes make your job be a lot harder, if not virtually impossible. It's the same thing with us. That's one thing that we've run into a couple of times where you're wanting to take the next step, and then it's like, oh, well, we have something, let me see if we can find it, I'll call someone. 2 days later, it's like, well, we got a new version, and, did they see it, did they sign anything? The person's been there 20 years or something like that. It can be problematic. For your job, it can be very useful, and I know for ours, if we ever come, that is one of the things if it comes to a situation warrants that type of stuff.
There was a big federal prosecution out in Colorado that just went belly up. Turned out the company had no policy regarding remote access. So, 1 minute comment from Professor Lau, real quick, and close it.
I wasn't expecting a 1 minute comment, but
All right,
So I will still go back to the fact that internet connectivity is increasing. Of course, smartphones are now becoming a primary tool of not just data consumption, but also production. How many iPad-only households do we see? Your power is being provided by interconnected systems that somehow have internet access for some reason. And even just the backbone itself is subject to a bunch of systems that we don't have very much control over. So your sphere of influence in what you do is going to extend beyond just the rack servers in your company. And it's going to become very interesting, especially with wearables, with body sensors, and so on and so forth. And where do you draw the line? What's my job and what's not my job anymore? And what if somebody's wearable tech is what's causing the problem? And what if it's wearable tech that you can no longer remove? Maybe it's an essential component to help somebody be more efficient or something. Can you ask them to please remove and disconnect Google Glass? No. So what I have found is that often the simple things are the ones that are overlooked, whether it's the FTP channels that are still being used or such and such that is still open. That stuff's easy to catch, right? That's not a thing. But it's the one person that tried to calculate the cost of postage to Canada and clicked on the sponsored Google link that pointed to the malware that got them in trouble. Now imagine that with wearable tech. Your systems have an entirely.
Thank you, Dr. Lam. He left you 32 seconds. You're down. 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
No.
Give us lots of information, yes. Now I have no time to talk, so count down. Give us as much information as you can on those surveys. Tell us things beyond what the questions are. If you think of something in relation to what we're talking about, because what we're doing could be something that eventually works its way up in the system. Things we discover, things that we can have found that improve security from a social behavioral perspective. Maybe something in the long term that can come and help you. And certainly, your knowledge can help us to help these other businesses. So we would certainly appreciate all the great information shared. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burnett. And I apologize. I will email out the contact information for them since it's not on the slides. And thank you all for your time. This is a big endeavor.
Thank you.